The gunshot echoed through the dusty streets of Monticello, Wyoming territory, in 1876, but it wasn't outlaw trouble, just another day of revelry as Eleanor Reed clutched her valise tightly, stepping off the stagecoach into a world entirely foreign to her Boston upbringing. The journey west had been grueling, but nothing compared to the challenge ahead, proving to her doubting family that a woman could make her own way in the untamed frontier. Eleanor smoothed her travel-worn dress and adjusted the small hat that had somehow managed to stay pinned to her auburn hair despite the jostling journey. At 22, she had defied her parents' wishes to marry the banker's son, choosing instead to accept her uncle's invitation to help manage his general store in this dusty corner of Wyoming. "Miss, you might want to step aside," the stagecoach driver called down as he tossed her trunk unceremoniously to the ground. "Folks here don't much care if you're standing in the way of progress." Eleanor quickly moved to the boardwalk, taking in the rustic wooden buildings that lined the main street. Men in dusty clothes and worn hats turned to stare at her, some tipping their hats in greeting, others simply pausing in their conversations to assess the newcomer. A group of local women whispered behind gloved hands, their eyes narrowed in curiosity or perhaps judgment. "You must be Henry's niece," a gruff voice called from the doorway of the general store. A man with a salt and pepper beard and kind eyes emerged, wiping his hands on a stained apron. "Uncle Robert," Eleanor said, smiling with relief at the familiar face she recognized from the daguerreotype her mother kept on the mantel. "I'm so pleased to finally meet you." He embraced her warmly. "Welcome to Monticello. Not exactly Boston, is it?" He chuckled, helping her with her trunk. "Your Aunt Margaret is eager to meet you. She's preparing a special supper." As they entered the store, the rich scents of leather, coffee, tobacco, and various spices enveloped Eleanor. The shelves were stocked with everything from canned goods to tools, fabric to ammunition, all essential items for frontier life. "I'm ready to learn everything about the business," Eleanor said, determination in her voice. "Mother worried I wouldn't last a week, but I intend to prove her wrong." Uncle Robert's expression turned serious. "This ain't easy country, Eleanor, especially for a city girl, but I appreciate your spirit." He led her through the store toward the back staircase. "Your aunt and I live upstairs. We've fixed up a room for you." Eleanor was settling into her modest but comfortable room when her Aunt Margaret appeared. A plump, cheerful woman with a warm smile that immediately put Eleanor at ease. "You must be exhausted, dear," Aunt Margaret said, helping Eleanor unpack. "Tomorrow will be soon enough to start learning the ropes." But Eleanor's determination wouldn't allow for delay. "Actually, I'd like to start right away. Perhaps after supper. Uncle Robert could show me the ledgers." Her aunt and uncle exchanged knowing glances over supper, a hearty meal of venison stew and fresh baked bread that surpassed anything Eleanor had tasted on her journey west. "There's more to surviving out here than keeping books," Uncle Robert said, passing her a plate of biscuits. "You'll need to learn to ride, for one thing. Can't get around these parts without a horse." Eleanor's heart sank slightly. In Boston, she had occasionally ridden in the park on gentle mares with side saddles, but nothing that would prepare her for Western horsemanship. Still, she lifted her chin. "I'm a quick learner." The next morning, Eleanor rose with the sun, donning the plain work dress Aunt Margaret had altered for her. By mid-morning, she had already learned to operate the cash register and was beginning to memorize the prices of common goods. "You're catching on quick," Uncle Robert acknowledged as the lunch hour approached. "But you still need to learn to ride. No use having you stuck in town all the time." "I can ride," Eleanor insisted, though her experience was limited. "We'll see about that," her uncle said with a wink. "I've arranged for Caleb Ryder to help you this afternoon. He's got the gentlest mare in the county." "A riding instructor?" Eleanor asked, puzzled. Uncle Robert laughed. "Not exactly. Caleb's the foreman at the Lazy S Ranch. Best horseman in these parts. He's bringing some supplies in today, and he owes me a favor. Eleanor's apprehension grew as the afternoon approached. She had expected a proper introduction to Wyoming horsemanship, not a lesson from some rough ranch hand. When the bell above the store door jingled around 2 o'clock, Eleanor was restocking the fabric shelf. She turned to see a tall man silhouetted in the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the afternoon light. As he stepped inside, removing his hat, Eleanor caught her breath. Caleb Ryder wasn't at all what she had expected. Tall and lean, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky, he moved with the easy grace of a man accustomed to hard work. His dark hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and a day's growth of beard shadowed his strong jaw. "Mr. Simmons," he greeted, nodding to Uncle Robert. "Got those fence supplies you ordered?" His gaze shifted to Eleanor, curiosity evident in his expression. "Caleb, this is my niece Eleanor Reed." Uncle Robert introduced them. "Eleanor, this is Caleb Ryder, foreman at the Lazy S." Caleb extended a calloused hand. "Miss Reed, welcome to Monticello." Eleanor accepted his handshake, surprised by the gentleness of his grip, despite his obvious strength. "Thank you, Mr. Ryder. Caleb's agreed to help you with your riding lessons," Uncle Robert explained. "Brought his mare Daisy into town special." Eleanor felt her cheeks flush. "That's very kind, but I assure you I can ride." A slight smile tugged at Caleb's lips. "Eastern riding and Western riding are two different animals, Miss Reed. No offense intended." "None taken," she replied stiffly, though internally she bristled at his assumption. An hour later, Eleanor found herself standing in the small corral behind the livery stable, facing a gentle-looking chestnut mare. Several townspeople had gathered to watch, including some of the women who had been whispering when she arrived. Caleb stood beside the horse, stroking her neck. "Daisy here is steady as they come. Perfect for a beginner." "I told you, I'm not a beginner," Eleanor insisted, approaching the horse with more confidence than she felt. Caleb demonstrated how to check the cinch and position the stirrups. Eleanor noticed the differences between this Western saddle and the side saddles she was accustomed to. When Caleb offered his cupped hands to help her mount, Eleanor hesitated only briefly before placing her foot in his hands and swinging up awkwardly. Immediately, she knew this was different. Sitting astride felt strange, and the saddle was larger, designed for long days of work rather than proper park rides. She adjusted her position, trying to look natural despite her discomfort. "Remember to keep your heels down," Caleb instructed, handing her the reins. "And don't pull too hard on her mouth." Eleanor nodded, gathering the reins as she had been taught in Boston. She gave Daisy a gentle nudge with her heels, and the mare obligingly began to walk forward. "See? I told you I could ride," Eleanor said, relief evident in her voice as she guided the horse around the corral. Caleb walked alongside. "Try to relax your back a bit. You're sitting too stiff." Eleanor tried to follow his instructions, but as she adjusted her position, she inadvertently tightened the reins. Daisy tossed her head in protest, coming to a stop. "Sorry," Eleanor murmured to the horse, loosening her grip. "Give her a little more rein," Caleb suggested, "and use your legs more to guide her." Eleanor nudged Daisy forward again, concentrating on keeping her seat as they circled the corral. She was just beginning to feel confident when Caleb called out, "Now let's try a trot." Before she could protest, he clicked his tongue, and Daisy obediently moved into a bouncy trot. Eleanor, unprepared for the transition, clutched at the saddle horn as she bounced uncomfortably. Her hat slipped sideways, and she heard laughter from the spectators. "Sit deep and move with her," Caleb called, but Eleanor was struggling to maintain her balance. With a particularly jarring bounce, she slid sideways, clinging desperately to the saddle horn as her feet lost the stirrups. The laughter grew louder as she fought to right herself, her face burning with embarrassment. Just as she was certain she would fall, Caleb was there, his strong hands steadying her waist, helping her find her seat again. "Whoa, Daisy," he called, and the mare immediately stopped. Eleanor was mortified. She could hear the townspeople's comments clearly now. "Fancy Eastern girl thinks she can ride. Should have seen her face when Daisy started trotting. She won't last a month out here." Tears of frustration threatened, but Eleanor blinked them back, refusing to give the onlookers the satisfaction. Caleb's voice was quiet, meant only for her ears. "Pay them no mind. You're doing just fine for your first Western ride." "But I made a fool of myself," she whispered. "Everyone starts somewhere," he replied, his blue eyes kind. "Ready to try again?" Eleanor took a deep breath and nodded, determined not to be defeated. "This time we'll go slower," Caleb promised, stepping back. "Remember, you're in charge, not the horse. Confidence is key." For the next hour, under Caleb's patient instruction, Eleanor practiced walking and gentle trotting. By the time they finished, most of the spectators had lost interest and wandered away. Though still far from proficient, Eleanor could at least remain seated during a trot without clinging to the saddle horn. As she dismounted, her legs trembled from the unaccustomed exercise. Caleb caught her elbow to steady her, his touch sending an unexpected warmth through her arm. "Thank you," she said, genuinely grateful despite her initial resistance. "I clearly had more to learn than I realized." Caleb's smile transformed his face, softening the weathered lines around his eyes. "You've got grit, Miss Reed. Most Eastern ladies would have quit after that first spill." "I'm not most ladies," Eleanor replied, surprising herself with her boldness. "No," he agreed, his gaze lingering on her face. "You certainly are not." Over the following weeks, Eleanor fell into a routine. Mornings were spent helping in the store, learning the business from Uncle Robert. 3 afternoons a week, Caleb would arrive with Daisy for her riding lessons. Despite her initial embarrassment, Eleanor found herself looking forward to these sessions. Caleb was a patient teacher, and under his guidance, her confidence and skill grew steadily. She learned to post properly during a trot, to guide with subtle shifts of weight and leg pressure, and even to canter without fear. More than the riding lessons, though, she enjoyed Caleb's company. Unlike the other townspeople who still regarded her as an outsider, Caleb treated her with respect, sharing stories of ranch life and listening with genuine interest to her tales of Boston. "Why did you really come west?" he asked one afternoon as they walked their horses back to the livery after a ride that had taken them beyond the town boundaries for the first time. Eleanor considered the question. "Freedom, I suppose. In Boston, my life was predetermined: marriage to someone suitable, running a household, attending society functions. Here, I can be more than just someone's wife or daughter." Caleb nodded thoughtfully. "The West is good for that. Out here, you're judged more by what you can do than by who your family is." "Is that why you came?" she asked, realizing she knew little about his past. "Partly," he admitted. "I grew up in Pennsylvania. My father wanted me to work in the steel mills like him, but I couldn't stand being cooped up. Headed west when I was 17, worked my way from ranch to ranch until I landed at the laziest 5 years ago." Eleanor did the math. "So you're 27. 28 last month," he confirmed with a smile. As summer progressed, Eleanor's riding improved dramatically. She could now confidently ride for hours, and Uncle Robert had even purchased a gentle gelding for her use. Yet Caleb continued to arrive for their scheduled lessons, though they had evolved into rides through the surrounding countryside rather than formal instruction. One warm August afternoon, They rode to a secluded spot by the river, allowing their horses to drink while they sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree. Eleanor had packed a simple lunch, which they shared as they watched the water flow by. "The ranch owner's talking about sending me to Kansas City next month," Caleb mentioned, breaking a comfortable silence. "Big cattle sale. I'd be gone for several weeks." Eleanor felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. "That sounds like an important responsibility." "It is," he agreed, "but I find myself reluctant to go." His blue eyes met hers. "I've grown accustomed to our rides." Eleanor's heart quickened. "As have I." A charged silence fell between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Caleb leaned slightly closer, and Eleanor found herself holding her breath, wondering if he might kiss her. But the moment was broken by the distant sound of riders approaching. Caleb pulled back, his expression shifting to alertness as he stood. "We should head back to town." The easy intimacy of the moment was lost, but Eleanor couldn't forget the look in his eyes. Something had changed between them, something that went beyond friendship or riding lessons. As September approached, Monticello prepared for its annual harvest festival. Despite having lived in town for only a few months, Eleanor found herself on the planning committee, largely due to Aunt Margaret's insistence that it would help her integrate with the community. "The festival's the biggest event of the year," Aunt Margaret explained as they hung bunting across the storefront. "There's a dance Saturday night that everyone attends." Eleanor's thoughts immediately went to Caleb. "Everyone?" Aunt Margaret's knowing smile suggested she understood exactly what, or rather who, Eleanor was thinking of. "Even the ranch hands clean up and come to town for it." The day of the festival dawned clear and crisp, with just a hint of autumn in the air. The main street was transformed with decorations, and stalls selling food, crafts, and games lined the boardwalks. Eleanor spent the morning helping with the baking contest, admiring the array of pies and cakes submitted by local women. She was arranging the entries when a familiar voice behind her made her turn. "Miss Reed." Caleb stood there, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable in clean dark trousers and a pressed white shirt. Without his usual cowboy hat, his dark hair was neatly combed, revealing a natural wave she hadn't noticed before. "Mr. Ryder," she replied, suddenly conscious of her own appearance in the new blue dress she had splurged on for the occasion. "You clean up quite nicely." A hint of color touched his cheeks. "As do you. That color suits you." Before Eleanor could respond, Mrs. Peterson, one of the women who had laughed at her first riding attempt, approached with a slice of apple pie. "Mr. Ryder, you simply must try my pie. I used my grandmother's secret recipe." Caleb accepted the pie with polite thanks, and Mrs. Peterson lingered, effectively ending any private conversation. Eleanor excused herself, trying not to feel disappointed as other women quickly surrounded Caleb, each eager for his attention. Throughout the day, Eleanor caught glimpses of Caleb as they both participated in various festival activities. Each time their eyes met across the crowd, she felt that same flutter in her chest. Several times, he seemed about to approach her, only to be intercepted by another townsperson. As evening approached, preparations for the dance began. The mercantile's large storeroom had been cleared to serve as the dance floor, with tables of refreshments along one wall and a small platform for the local musicians in the corner. Eleanor helped arrange the punch bowl and platters of cookies, all while watching the door for Caleb's arrival. The room gradually filled with townspeople and ranchers from the surrounding area, all in their finest clothes, eager for the rare opportunity to socialize. The musicians struck up a lively tune, and couples moved onto the floor. Eleanor stood with Aunt Margaret, watching the dancers and declining several invitations from local men. "You're waiting for someone in particular," Aunt Margaret observed. Not a question but a statement. Eleanor sighed. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who knows you," her aunt replied kindly. And perhaps to the young man himself. As if summoned by their conversation, Caleb appeared in the doorway. His eyes scanned the room, stopping when they found Eleanor. He made his way through the crowd toward her, nodding politely to those who greeted him but never breaking his stride. "Miss Reed," he said as he reached her, "would you honor me with a dance?" Eleanor's heart leapt. "I would be delighted, Mr. Ryder." As he led her onto the dance floor, she noticed several women watching with undisguised envy. The musicians began a waltz, and Caleb's hand settled at her waist, his touch firm but gentle as he guided her into the dance. "I've been trying to speak with you all day," he said as they moved together. "I noticed," Eleanor replied. "You seem quite popular among the ladies of Monticello." A smile quirked his lips. "Not by my choice. There's only one lady whose company I've been seeking." The directness of his statement sent warmth spreading through Eleanor. "Is that so?" "It is," he confirmed, his blue eyes never leaving hers. "The cattle drive to Kansas City has been postponed. The ranch owner's son is taking it instead." "I'm glad to hear it," Eleanor admitted. "I would have missed our rides." "Eleanor," he said, using her given name for the first time, "I need to be honest with you. My interest in continuing our time together has nothing to do with riding lessons." The dance floor seemed to fall away, the music fading into the background as Eleanor focused entirely on Caleb's face. "What is your interest, then?" "I think you know," he said softly. "From the moment I saw you in your uncle's store, trying so hard to prove yourself, I've admired your spirit. Getting to know you these past months has only deepened that admiration." Eleanor felt a surge of courage. "I've developed certain feelings as well." The song ended, but neither of them moved to separate. Caleb's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Would you care to step outside for some air?" They slipped through the side door into the cool September night. Stars blanketed the sky above them, more brilliant than Eleanor had ever seen in Boston. Caleb guided her to a quiet spot beside the building, away from the few other couples seeking privacy. "I'm not a man of means," Caleb said without preamble. "I've saved some money, enough to buy a small spread someday. But right now I've got little to offer besides hard work and determination." Eleanor's breath caught. "Are you courting me, Mr. Ryder?" "I'm trying to," he replied, a smile in his voice despite the seriousness of his words. "I'm not doing a very good job of it, am I?" "On the contrary," Eleanor said, emboldened by the darkness. "I find your honesty refreshing after the calculated courtships I observed in Boston." Caleb took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I know you came west seeking independence. The last thing I want is to interfere with that." "Perhaps independence doesn't mean being alone," Eleanor suggested. "Perhaps it means having the freedom to choose one's own path and one's own partner." In the dim light spilling from the windows, she saw Caleb's expression soften. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. Eleanor's eyes fluttered closed as his lips met hers, gentle and questioning at first, then more certain as she responded. When they finally parted, Eleanor felt breathless, her heart racing. Caleb's forehead rested against hers, his breathing uneven. "I've wanted to do that since you first climbed onto Daisy's back," he confessed. "Even when you nearly fell off." Eleanor laughed softly. "I was mortified that day. Everyone was laughing at me." "Not everyone," Caleb corrected. "I admired your courage, getting back on despite their mockery. You've got more grit than most men I know." Their second kiss was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. They stepped apart as several couples emerged from the dance, but Caleb kept hold of Eleanor's hand, a public declaration of his intentions. The following weeks saw Caleb courting Eleanor properly, with Uncle Robert's blessing. He called at the store on Sundays to escort her to church, brought small gifts when he came to town for supplies, and continued their rides through the countryside, now officially courting outings rather than riding lessons. As autumn deepened, Eleanor found herself more at home in Monticello than she had ever felt in Boston. She had mastered the store operations, becoming an essential part of the business. The townspeople who had once laughed at her attempts to adapt now grudgingly respected her determination. Even Mrs. Peterson had stopped making snide remarks after Eleanor had successfully organized a profitable harvest fair for the church. On a crisp November afternoon, Caleb arrived at the store with excitement evident in his expression. "I've got news," he told Eleanor as she finished helping a customer. "Big news." He waited until they were alone before continuing. "Old man Jenkins is selling his place 160 acres just west of town. Good water, decent grazing land, and a small cabin that's weathertight." Eleanor's pulse quickened at the intensity in his eyes. "That sounds promising." "I made an offer," Caleb said. "With my savings and the bonus the ranch owner gave me for last year's successful drive, I can just manage it." Jenkins accepted this morning. "Caleb, that's wonderful," Eleanor exclaimed, genuinely happy for him. "Your own ranch at last." "Not just a ranch," he corrected, taking her hands in his. "A home. Our home, if you'll have me." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "Eleanor Reed, will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up within Eleanor, so overwhelming that for a moment she couldn't speak. This was everything she hadn't known she wanted when she came west, not just independence, but partnership with a man who respected her strength. "Yes," she managed finally. "Yes, Caleb, I will." Their December wedding was simple but joyful, held in the small church with the entire town in attendance. Even those who had once mocked Eleanor now offered genuine congratulations. Aunt Margaret wept happy tears, and Uncle Robert gave her away with evident pride. As they exchanged vows, Eleanor reflected on how far she had come from that first day in Monticello. She had sought freedom and found love as well, proving to herself and everyone else that she belonged in this wild, beautiful country. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the town hall. As the dancing began, Eleanor found herself surrounded by the same women who had laughed at her first attempt at riding. "We owe you an apology," Mrs. Peterson said, surprising Eleanor. "We were unkind when you arrived. It's not easy for women out here, and we forget sometimes that we were all newcomers once." "Thank you," Eleanor said, touched by the unexpected gesture. "I've grown to love Monticello and its people, even those who doubted me." "Well, you proved us wrong," another woman admitted, "especially with your riding. You handle that gelding of yours better than most born here." Caleb appeared at her side, slipping an arm around her waist. "My wife has always been a quick learner," he said, pride evident in his voice. Later, as they danced together as husband and wife for the first time, Eleanor couldn't help but reflect on how it had all begun. "Do you remember telling me I was doing just fine that first day, when everyone was laughing at me?" Caleb pulled her closer. "I meant it. I saw something in you that day, a determination that matched the land itself. That's when I started falling in love with you, though I didn't recognize it then." "And to think," Eleanor mused, "if I hadn't been so stubborn about proving myself, we might never have met." "Stubbornness is an essential quality out here," Caleb laughed. "We call it persistence when it works out well." As the winter snow blanketed their small ranch, Eleanor and Caleb worked side by side to establish their home. The cabin was humble but cozy, and with each improvement they made, it became more their own. Eleanor learned to cook on a wood stove, to preserve food for winter, and to manage the household accounts with the same precision she had applied to her uncle's store. By spring, They had acquired a small herd of cattle and several horses that Caleb was training to sell. Eleanor surprised him by suggesting they expand into breeding the gentle, reliable horses that were perfect for newcomers to the West. "You're thinking like a true rancher now," Caleb said, impressed by her business acumen. "I'm thinking of all the Eastern ladies who might follow in my footsteps," Eleanor replied. "They'll need horses they can trust, and instructors who won't laugh when they struggle." Their ranch, which they named New Beginnings, gradually grew prosperous. Eleanor continued to help at her uncle's store 2 days a week, maintaining her independence while building a life with Caleb. Together, they weathered the challenges of frontier life: drought one summer, harsh blizzards the next winter, and the constant work of maintaining a ranch. 5 years after their wedding, as they sat on the porch of their now expanded home watching their 3-year-old son playing with a gentle foal, Eleanor reflected on how completely her life had transformed. "Do you ever regret it?" Caleb asked, seeming to read her thoughts. "Leaving Boston, taking a chance on a cowboy with big dreams?" Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, her hand resting on her swollen belly where their second child grew. "Not for a single moment. This is exactly where I'm meant to be." As if to emphasize her words, their son Christopher climbed onto the back of the patient foal, giggling with delight as the young horse stood perfectly still, accustomed to the boy's antics. "Like mother, like son," Caleb observed with a smile. "Though he started riding a bit younger than you did." Eleanor laughed, remembering her own first clumsy attempts. "At least no one's laughing at him." "They laughed at you," Caleb reminded her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "But you showed them all what you were made of. That's the story I'll tell our children, how their mother came west as a city girl and ended up outshining the cowboys." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant golds and pinks, Eleanor savored the quiet contentment of the life she had built, a life she could never have imagined that first day in Monticello when they laughed as she tried to ride, and a kind-eyed cowboy told her she was doing just fine.